This is a 2009 Bentley Brooklands, and it is the ultimate luxury coupe. Or at least it was Bentley's flagship luxury coupe back in 2009 when it was new. Back then, this car had a sticker price of more than $400,000, which translates to just under $500,000 in today's money. And today I'm going to review this car and show you what that money got you. I've borrowed this Bentley Brooklands from Rancho Santa Fe Autos, which is a small car dealership here in the San Diego area with an excellent inventory of cool cars, from exotics to classics to just interesting and rare stuff. You can check out Rancho Santa Fe Autos by clicking the link in the description below. But let's talk Brooklands. The Brooklands was essentially a coupe version of the Bentley Azure, which I've already reviewed. That was a luxury convertible. This was aimed at wealthy buyers who wanted a giant luxury two-door car with a fixed roof instead of a convertible top. Now, back then, the Brooklands and the Azure were Bentley's flagship models. The thinking was, if you were rich, you bought a Continental GT. If you were wealthy, you bought one of these. Compared to other recent Bentley models, the Brooklands is exceptionally rare. When this car came out, Bentley said they would limit production to just 500 units, but the Brooklands debuted into the global economic recession in 2008 and 2009, so they had trouble selling even those. On paper, the Brooklands is pretty cool. It uses a twin-turbo V8 with 530 horsepower and 775 pound-feet of torque. That is a serious number. Better yet, depreciation has taken its toll on the Brooklands. This one is offered for sale by Rancho Santa Fe Autos for under $100,000, which is truly a fraction of its original price. And today, I'm going to show you around the Brooklands and show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'm going to give it a Doug score. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the Brooklands with getting in, and that means starting with the key, which is unusually simple and basic. You can see there's the Bentley logo on one side. You flip it over and you have a lock button and an unlock button, and that's it. There's no trunk popper, there's no alarm button, there's no special styling considering you paid 400 grand for this thing. Just a simple everyday key. And next up, climbing inside, we move on to the door. There's surprisingly a lot to cover with this door. For one thing, it is absolutely huge. This is a big car, and this door has to provide access to both the back and front seats, so it's really long. So long, in fact, that it has two door handles. If you're sitting in the front seat, you can open the door by pulling the front door handle. If you're sitting in the back seat, there's a door handle for you also. Just reach forward and you can see there is a second door handle further back towards the rear seats for rear passengers to grab when they're getting out of the Brooklands. It's not often that you see a big coupe that is so big it's got to have two door handles for one door. Now, some other notable quirks with the door. One is the trim. On the top of the door, you have this beautiful wood trim with the Bentley B winged logo placed right in the middle. Absolutely gorgeous, opulent look, precisely as you'd expect, given this car's status and cost. But probably the best part of this door area is this door sill. Some cars leave this blank, but not for $400,000. You can see it says Bentley Brooklands over in one half, and then the other half is actually personalized. It specifically says Bentley Brooklands commissioned for J. Edwin Holiday. You know you're rich when your Bentley says your name on it when you open the door. And next up, we move on to one of my very favorite Brooklands features. In the center console, you can see there's this little switch here next to the gear lever. Looks kind of unfamiliar. It turns out you press that switch and all the windows roll down at once. Take a look. you can see they all go down in unison with the push of one button. Now, this is especially cool because the Brooklands is pillarless, meaning there's no B-pillar. When you open the front and back windows, you just have one giant opening for air to flow through. It really enhances your relaxed coupe driving experience. And so the cool thing about being able to roll down all the windows at once is you just press one button and you then have these giant openings on the side. Very special feature. And of course it works the other way as well. So you're driving along like this and you're parking or it starts raining, just pull on the switch and then the windows all go up at once, so you can be inside your quiet Bentley cocoon with the push of a button as well. And next up, I'm gonna move on to the other quirks and features in the Brooklands interior. One is just how beautiful and stately it is in here. Now, the Brooklands was out at the same time as the Continental GT, and the Continental GT was faster and more powerful, but the Brooklands was more expensive. The difference was intended to be that the Continental GT was for the young buyer who wanted something cool and new and fresh and wanted to go fast. The Brooklands was for the wealthy old money buyer, and you can really tell in this interior. You have this same upright dashboard that was characteristic of Bentleys for years and years. And the materials, the quality, the finishes, it's all about old school luxury in here rather than technology. I'll give you some examples of the old school luxury in this interior, starting with the colors. You can see most of the interior is cream, but there are also dark red accents to perfectly match the exterior color. For instance, the steering wheel is half cream and half dark red so that the exterior is carried inside. Same deal with the leather on the dashboard. You can see the top half is dark red to match the exterior color, and the lower half is cream to match the rest of the interior. You don't get a lot of dark red and cream interiors on new sporty cars. And the old school luxury and finishes continues from there. Check out the wood trim on the dashboard. Very beautiful wood as you'd expect from a Bentley, but the thing I like is the trim next to the wood trim. You have a separate wood. So you have two different types of wood placed together. Again, not something you find in modern cars. That is very much an old school pure luxury trait. And another old school trait in this car, if you're a young person with an expensive car, you probably want to turn up your music so everybody's looking at you. Not so in the Brooklands. In fact, the radio is actually hidden from view behind this wood panel with a Bentley Flying B on it. You have to press that in order to access the radio, but in this car's default state, the radio is out of the way because you drive this car, you want to waft along in pure silence. And by the way, I feel like now is maybe the time to introduce the window sticker and discuss how a car like this becomes a $408,000 vehicle. So here's the deal. The base price is $341,000. So you're already in a tremendously expensive territory before you start adding options. But there are many options. For one, by far the most expensive option on this car is carbon ceramic brakes. You think Porsche charges a lot for carbon ceramic brakes at like $10,000 to $12,000? In this car, they're $30,000. That is a serious option. But the options just continue from there. That two-tone wood that I liked on the dashboard, Bentley calls that the Vavona veneer with a cherry substrate. And they charge you $5,200 for it, just for some extra wood trim on your dashboard. And all of the other options are similar to this and similarly expensive, although you go down and you find my favorite option, which is called single thin fine lines. For those thin fine lines, which I think is the pinstriping on the outside of the car, Bentley charges you only $240, which is a bargain actually. But maybe the craziest option in this entire car is the backup camera, which is now federally mandated on all new cars sold in the United States. Back in 2009, it wasn't mandatory, and if you wanted to get it in your Bentley, they charged you $2,500 for a backup camera, which is now standard on a $13,000 Mitsubishi Mirage. Now, one interesting thing, if you look on the window sticker at the backup camera line item, you can see it says reversing camera to sat nav screen. But I already kind of showed you around this interior, and there is no sat-nav screen. So where does the backup camera display go? Well, the answer is there is a screen in this interior, but it's hidden. You go onto the ceiling, you press this little I button with an arrow pointing up, and the infotainment screen rises up from the dashboard. It's hidden face down until you want it. And once the infotainment screen is up, you can clearly tell this is not a touchscreen. It's too old and too far away from your reach. Instead, it's controlled by a remote. The remote is located in this little pouch in the driver's footwell, designed perfectly to hold the infotainment remote. There's also another pouch, same size in the passenger footwell, so you can share remote duties if you want. But you press this remote and you can go through the infotainment system. Although it's worth noting, this is pretty much only a navigation system. Everything else, your radio, your climate controls, your gauges, is in the center control stack. So the screen that rises up is pretty much just navigation and that backup camera. And next up, another interesting quirk of the Brooklands, this car has no cup holders. Bentley apparently didn't feel that was necessary. Instead, you have some rather unusual items in the center console area. For one thing, the first item you see when you look in these areas, these armrests, or at least they look like armrests, but actually you can open them. Open up the one on the passenger side and you have the Bentley phone, which is a little old school phone with a small screen and a Bentley Flying B logo on it. That is a pretty cool little feature. Now, if you open up the armrest on the driver's side, you have a little storage compartment in there and a little screen that I guess was used for the phone, but you also have this card that contains your voice command information. This car was probably one of the very first Bentley models with a voice command system, and this card was intended to instruct you on how to use it to make calls or do other things with your built-in phone. Now, the other interesting item in the center console of this car, you fold back these armrests and you have this kind of wood roll top piece. If you roll it back, there are some strange items in here. One is the heated seat controls. You have 6 different levels of heated seating. A lot of Volkswagen, Audi, Bentley models had this at the time. I always thought it was absurd. Can anybody really tell the difference between seat heater level 4 and seat heater level 5? Apparently, Bentley felt their customers' butts were really that sensitive. The other interesting thing, at the back of this roll-top center console area, you do have like a little holder, but you can tell it's not designed for cups. Instead, I believe this is a tissue holder. You're supposed to get a tissue box that fits into this space, and then you can leave tissues in there and pull them out when you need them. Apparently, Bentley felt a tissue holder was more important than a cup holder. Strange decision. And next up, a few other notable items in the front here. One, go to the gauge cluster, take a look at the tachometer. It's unusual for its low redline. You can see it tops out at 5,000 RPM, and redline starts around 4,600 RPM. Bentley engineered this car to be as relaxed as possible so that even at full throttle, the engine is not really working all that hard, and you don't have to hear it getting all loud and disturbing your peace and quiet. The other item I find interesting in the front seat of this car, you spend over $400,000 and you don't get a sunroof. That was intentional. The thinking was if you wanted the sun, you would buy the Azure, which was the convertible version of this car. But if you wanted a coupe, then you got a coupe. And you couldn't get a Brooklands with an open or glass roof. And next up, we move on to the back seat of the Brooklands. And while it's usually rather difficult to get into the back seat of these two-door cars, it's pretty easy in the Brooklands due to its massive size. Basically, you just pull up on this lever on the side of the seat, you push the seat forward, and it automatically kind of glides forward at the same time. And then it gives you a pretty big opening to get into the back, assuming you're willing to wait, which of course I am. And then you can just climb right in, and you have your back seat all to yourself. Now, once you're in the back seat, you'll find that there's actually quite a bit to talk about back here. Usually two-door cars have kind of afterthought back seats, but not in the Brooklands. For one thing, it's actually reasonably roomy back here. Even with the front seats in a normal position, you have quite a bit of room as a rear passenger in the Brooklands, owing to the fact that this car is massively long. But beyond that, it's also surprisingly luxurious back here. For one thing, you have the same wood trim on the sides of the seat seat that you do on the top of the front doors, including the winged Bentley B right in the middle, adding to your luxury experience. You also have seat controls back here. These little switches in the rear center console will actually move the seat forward or backwards, which is surprising for a rear seat in a two-door car. I'm not sure if I've seen that before. And below the seat controls, you have heated rear seats. 2 stages, not 6 like in front, but heated rear seats in a two-door car from '09 is still a pretty big deal. Of course, another luxury you have back here is power windows. I showed you that if you're sitting in the front, you can roll down all the windows at once, but rear passengers can also individually roll down their tiny little quarter window. It seemed a little odd to have just the rear window down with the front window up, but it is possible in this car if that's what you want. And check this out, another interesting feature back here. In the center console, you have another one of these wood roll top things. You roll it back and you can see there's a cigarette lighter in here and what appears to be like a cup holder thing. Actually, that's a rear seat ashtray. You're supposed to put your ashes in there and then you can easily remove it to dump your ashes once you've filled it up. This was Bentley's solution for a rear ashtray in case you really wanted to have your rear seat passengers smoking. You have this kind of drink cup looking thing with a B logo on it for your ashtray. And next up, we move outside the Brooklands into the back where there are a few interesting items worth noting. One is how you get into the trunk. Now, if the car is unlocked, there's a little trunk popper button right above the license plate. But if it's locked and you want to get into the trunk, I already showed you there's no trunk popper on the key. So how do you get back here? Well, you can see the winged Bentley B logo back here, of course, but there's a hidden trick to it. You can flip up the B and that's where the keyhole is for the trunk. Then just stick in your key, turn it, and you can open it right up. Pretty cool. Now, once you're in the trunk, there are a few notable items back here worth mentioning. Probably my favorite is the umbrellas. Right up against the back of the trunk, you have 2 separate umbrellas in specific umbrella positions. And these are, of course, Bentley umbrellas with the logo on it and the British racing green color. Also in the trunk, you have this Bentley case, this little zippered pouch. That is for your trickle charger. So if you're gonna park your Brooklands for a long time and not use it, you can use this charger to plug it in to this little cord in the trunk, and it keeps your battery from going dead while you're not driving your Brooklands. But my very favorite thing around back has nothing to do with the trunk or opening the trunk. Instead, it's on the rear bumper, because take a look at the backup camera location. Yes, this is it, right in the middle of your rear bumper. Very obvious, looks ridiculous. Everybody in modern cars integrates it like above the license plate out of view, but not Bentley on the Brooklands. It's just this wart in your rear bumper, always there, looking unusually obvious for a backup camera. And next up, we move around to the front of the Brooklands where there are more quirks and features. I'm gonna start under the hood. One of my very favorite things in any engine bay is this plaque that says 6 3/4 liter Brooklands. It seems so proper, so perfect, so fitting of this car. Of course, Bentley doesn't refer to this as a 6.75 liter engine, but rather a 6 3/4. Now, like I mentioned, this V8 twin turbocharged 530 horsepower, 775 pound-feet of torque. At the time, it had more torque than any other gas-powered V8 engine ever in this car, which is pretty cool. Now, another item worth noting up here is the hood ornament. You know that Bentley's logo is this B in the center and then wings on the sides. The hood ornament on the Brooklands is a 3D version of that. You have a B with actual wings behind it. It's Bentley's attempt to make a 3D ornamental version of their well-known logo. One other interesting thing about this hood ornament, it's designed to retract in an accident. So if there's pressure or damage from a crash on this hood ornament, it will actually fall back into the grille. This is intended to make it safer for pedestrians. So if you hit a pedestrian, it doesn't just stab them. Instead, the B logo falls away to make the impact not as bad. And finally, I want to talk about this car's styling, because I love this car's styling. This was among the last of the big old school luxury coupes. Rolls-Royce also made a coupe version of the Phantom around this time, also a very rare car, but these were the last old school big luxury coupes until the Wraith came out years later. Now, I love the Wraith, but it doesn't have the same look as a car like the Brooklands. This was so understated. You just didn't know what you were looking at unless you knew, and then you turned your head and stared with an open mouth because you knew how expensive this car was and how rare and how special it is. This car really was one of the last of the old school. And given market changes and trends and the increase in SUV popularity, I highly doubt that Bentley will ever again make another flagship full-size luxury coupe like this. It was a very special car and kind of the end of an era. And so those are the quirks and features of the Bentley Brooklands. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the Brooklands. I remember back when this thing came out, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And it really was. They were rare, they were special, but you kind of had to know. It just looked like a RANCHO coupe. It was so understated. And a lot of people asked, why would you get a Brooklands when you could have a Continental GT? The Continental GT was cheaper, faster, more powerful. It was better, right? But it was a certain type of buyer who bought the Brooklands. A statistic I heard back in the day was that the average Continental GT customer was worth $3 million. The average RANCHO customer was worth $30 million. And of course that extends to the Brooklands being essentially the coupe version of the RANCHO. All right, so what's this thing like on the road? It's big. This is a big coupe. It feels big. It drives big. That was the intent. You know, back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, if you were rich, you bought a big coupe to kind of show the world. The Cadillac Eldorados and Rolls Royces and Bentleys and all of that stuff. Now, it's very comfortable in here, as you might expect. Nice and quiet and relaxed and luxurious. The ride quality is excellent, although not as good as modern ultra luxury cars. You feel bumps a little bit more than you would in a new Mulsanne or a Rolls Phantom or something like that. Now, regarding the braking in this car, the brakes are fine, but I wouldn't call them any better than that, believe it or not. This is a big, heavy car, and despite these $30,000 carbon ceramic brakes, it seems like it's actually kind of fighting to stop the car if you are trying to really push it to stop. But the theory behind carbon ceramic brakes is not that they have better stopping power, but they dissipate heat faster, which means they can stay good for longer, and that is a good feature to have in a car that's this heavy. As for steering and handling, this is where the car really starts to lose its kind of sporty credential. Yes, it's fast. Yes, it's got all this power. But it doesn't steer like a sporty car. It's a big, heavy, lumbering car, and they haven't really made much of an attempt to neutralize that. Ultimately, I think this car is really cool. It is not $408,000 cool in '09 money. $500,000 today, basically. But it's crazy how cheap this has gotten relative to how expensive it was back then. And it's still a pretty relevant car. Yeah, it doesn't have the newest tech, but it didn't have the newest tech when it first came out. It's all about kind of the luxury, the opulence, the materials. There's a very limited number of these. It's a special car, and I think it's kind of cool. And so that's the 2009 Bentley Brooklands. I almost never see these. They're tremendously rare, 500 units for the entire planet. It turns out the kind of person spending $500,000 on a car doesn't want a giant, rather impractical luxury coupe. And in fact, after this car went out of production, Bentley abandoned the flagship coupe segment, and they haven't been back since. But it is cool to check this car out and examine the flagship Bentley from a decade ago. Anyway, now it's time to give the Brooklands a Doug score.
Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the Brooklands looks nice, stately, and sleek, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Acceleration does 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Handling, it's a big, heavy behemoth of a car, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Fun factor is okay. It's fun to pilot this big thing, but it's not radically exciting to drive, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Cool factor is good. These are cool if you're in the know, but most people aren't, and it gets a 6 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 26 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. It's well equipped, but not excessively so, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Comfort is excellent, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Quality is good, though reliability is a bit dubious, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Practicality is normal for a big coupe, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Finally, value, and these are becoming cheaper, though they're still pricey. It gets a 5 out of 10 for a total daily score of 28 out of 50. Added up, and the Doug score is 54 out of 100, which places it here against other luxury vehicles from this period. The Brooklands beats out the Azure because the Brooklands has more power and better performance, but both lose to the more practical RANCHO. Still, these are cool cars if you're into old school luxury.
It hauls, and it does so what?